Yesterday, Sean Diddy Combs attempted to hang himself in prison. The music mogul, who arrived confident that he would be released within days, now faces a grim reality. He is in an isolated cell, away from other inmates, under constant surveillance. But what scares prison officials most is not just his physical condition, but what he says. According to insiders, Diddy has started talking to himself, repeating the same cryptic and terrifying words. "They're coming." His demeanor has changed dramatically. He seems haunted, convinced that he has been deceived. "They lied to me. But who are they? And what exactly did they lie to him about?" Rumors are circulating that Diddy is carrying a dangerous secret. Something so big that it could shake the structures of power. Something that may have made him a target, not just of the law, but of forces much larger. Is he losing his mind? Or trying to warn us about something we don't yet understand? But the question is, what did you know? And will he survive enough time to tell? If you want to find out all the dark details of this story, you leave the like now and subscribe to the channel, because what I will show you today will make you goosebumps. Now it tells me, is this just paranoia, or Diddy is really marked to die? Watch until the end and draw your own conclusions. The news ran like a fire within the dark walls of Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC in Brooklyn. Sean Diddy Combs, one of the most influential tycoons of music and entertainment, was now under suicidal observation. For a man used to luxury, power, and absolute control over his life and business, that was the first sign that everything had irreversibly changed since his arrival. Officers knew that he could not be treated as an ordinary prisoner. The heavy accusations that weighed against him, who went from trafficking to aggression, transformed him not only into a target inside the prison, but also into someone whose presence could unbalance the delicate ecosystem of the place. Like any public figure involved in high-profile crimes, he required a differentiated protocol and the decision to put it under suicidal watch. Suicide observation did not only come by medical precaution, but also, as a safety measure, the impact of reality. The first moments inside the MDC were a brutal shock for Diddy. He arrived believing that he would leave quickly, that his influence and connections would guarantee an early release. However, the truth turned out to be hard and undeniable. He would not go anywhere anytime soon. The refusal of the first bail attempt was an unexpected blow, and every minute passed, the cell seemed to be a cruel reminder that his power was fading. The weight of the situation began to reflect on his posture. The once charismatic and dominant Diddy was visibly shot down. His lost gaze, the slowest movements, the heavy breath, all denounced a man who was beginning to understand the size of his fall. His cell, unlike the luxurious mansions and suites where he was used to living, was now a cold space illuminated by white and impersonal lights, without privacy and without any remnants of the life he built. The nights were long, the constant noise of prison steps echoing in the corridors. Whispering voices, the metallic sound of the doors closing created an anxiety symphony. He barely slept, and when he did, he woke up scared, panting. His restless behavior was noticed by the guards, who began reporting signs of extreme stress, paranoia, and increasing anxiety. The decision to put it under observation. Over the days, Diddy's situation only got worse. He spoke less and less, avoided eye contact, and spent long periods sitting in the corner of his cell, immersed in thoughts that no one could decipher. Prison guards and doctors were alerted to their condition, and the decision was made. It needed to be monitored 24 hours a day. Suicide observation within the MDC follows a strict protocol. Diddy was transferred to a special cell where the guards could constantly observe it. He had his clothes exchanged for a suicide-proof uniform made from special material that prevents any attempted self-mutilation. All objects that could represent a risk have been removed, from bedsheets to basic hygiene utensils. Even the cutlery he received for meals were flexible plastic. Also, he never stayed alone for a long time. Guards reviewed their cell at short intervals, and a prison psychiatrist was assigned to evaluate his mental state regularly. But what caught the most attention was his silence. He asked for nothing. He didn't complain. He didn't try to explain himself. It just stared at the emptiness, as if they were still trying to sue everything that had happened. What did the future reserve? Suicide observation was interpreted in different ways by detainees and the external public. For some, it was a strategy to get different treatment and avoid interactions with other prisoners. For others, it was a clear sign that Diddy was reaching the limit, unable to deal with the new reality. The media began to speculate about his emotional state, and some vehicles even suggested that he was suffering a severe nervous crisis. Within prison, rumors circulated even more intensely. Is this just the beginning of your full ruin, or did you still have cards to play? The transition was brutal. For a man used to privacy, luxury, and unrestricted power, the reality of being confined within the Metropolitan Detention Center was a blow that hit Diddy with a force he was not prepared to face. The detention center did not make concessions, no matter who was inside its walls. The same man who once traveled mansions, corridors, and staying in presidential suites, now walked through humid, cold corridors, surrounded by steel doors and peeled walls, where each step echoed as a reminder of his new reality. The first impression, the cold of prison. From the early moments, the difference between the world Diddy knew and the world that now inhabited has become evident. As soon as it was processed, your brand clothes were exchanged for a poorly adjusted orange jumpsuit, the definitive symbol of your new condition. The cheap fabric hung from his body, clumsy, and his luxury sneakers were replaced by uncomfortable plastic shoes. MDC corridors exuded an oppressive atmosphere, a mixture of sweat, cleaning chemicals, and the unmistakable smell of industrialized food served in metal trays. The constant noise of doors knocking, orders being shouted, and murmurs between detainees created a sound background that made a point of reminding him that this was not a common place. This was a place where men were reduced to numbers, where names and status lost any relevance. The shock was not only physical, but also psychological. Diddy has always been a man used to commanding an environment, making the rules, having absolute control over every detail of his life. But here, he was just one of hundreds of prisoners, and that was something he had not yet accepted. The first contact with the other detainees, the cafeteria, was the first big test. The food served there was far from the gourmet dinners he used to go to. A piece of indefinable processed meat, accompanied by tasteless vegetables, and a watery juice was the menu of the day. When he received his tray, there were no applause. There was no greetings. On the contrary, there were looks. Looks that carried judgment, curiosity, and in some cases, contempt. He tried to keep his posture, hold his head up, as if it was still the man everyone knew outside. But his body delivered the truth. Her shoulders were tense. Her hand trembled slightly as she held the tray. Her eyes could not fix on one point. When he finally sat on an isolated table, the silence around him was almost deafening. It was not respect. It was not admiration. It was much worse. It was isolation. No one wanted to associate with him. Not because it was a celebrity, but because the accusations that brought him there were too dark, too scary. Rumors had already reached the MDC corridors, and inside, even without proof, a man's reputation was his biggest shield or his greatest threat. The whispers were constant. Did you see him? He doesn't look so tough now. Will he last a long way inside? I heard that he knows things he shouldn't know. The isolation was not just self-imposed, it was deliberated. The detainees watched him, but kept distance. Not because they respected him, but because they didn't trust him. And in prison, confidence can be the difference between life and death. The loss of identity. With each passing day, Diddy was forced to face a cruel truth. He was no longer a tycoon. He was no longer a hip-hop legend. He was no longer a powerful man. Within those walls, he was just a prisoner, a number, a body taking up space. The change began to reflect on him. The mirrors of prison showed a different man from the one that appeared on covers of luxurious magazines and videos. His face began to lose the shine of vanity, without access to the expensive products he always used. Her beard, once perfectly trimmed, now grew disorderly, failed. Her eyes, once vibrant and dominant, were now back, red, carrying tiredness and restlessness. For the first time in his life, he was not in control. The harsh reality of the cell. Back in the cell, the space was small, claustrophobic, a thin bed, a toilet of metal and a rusty sink. No soft pillows, no longing baths, no luxury, just a monotonous and merciless routine. He began to lose the notion of time. The prison has a cruel way of distorting the days, making the hours dragging on, and at the same time disappearing in the blink of an eye. What's next? Diddy still did not accept his new reality completely, but the signs of his transformation were becoming increasingly evident. Its initial arrogance began to give way to silence. His body began to give in to exhaustion, and his eyes began to reveal something they had rarely shown throughout his career: fear. The initial prison shock was overwhelming, but the question that everyone wondered now was, Was he ready to face what would come next? From the moment Sean Diddy Combs entered the Metropolitan Detention Center, one thing became clear. He was not welcome, not because it is a celebrity, but for the weight of the accusations it carried within the arrests. Crimes committed outside are not forgotten, and often the reputation of a prisoner may be his real sentence. In Diddy's case, isolation was not just a natural consequence of his situation, but a choice made by the detainees themselves. He was not received with enthusiasm, respect, or even curiosity. On the contrary, his presence aroused a different kind of reaction: distrust, contempt, and silence. The climate of rejection. In prison, there are unclear codes that govern the coexistence. Certain crimes are more tolerated than others, and certain prisoners are seen as worthy of respect than others. Diddy, with his long list of accusations involving robbery, abuse, trafficking, and coercion, entered a territory where his allegations made him a dangerous man. Not for crimes, but because no one wanted to be associated with him. The first days were revealing. In the cafeterias, the seats around him remained empty. When he tried to make eye contact with other prisoners, they looked away or stared at him with a silent hostility. The message was clear. No one wanted to be close to him. He was not assaulted or directly threatened, but contempt and isolation were forms of punishment alone. For a man used to being the center of attention, being ignored was perhaps a blow as strong as any physical aggression. The whispers and rumors. Diddy may not have been attacked, but his name circulated through the prison corridors in a different way. What bothered the detainees most was not his fame, but what he could know. Rumors began to spread. Was there anything he hid? Was anyone outside, trying to make sure they never left? Some of the most common conversations were, "Did you hear about the list?" Many believed that Diddy had a secret document with names of powerful people involved in such great scandals that they could overthrow careers, destroy empires, and even put lives at risk. He thinks he can buy someone inside. Some said Diddy was still convinced that he could use his fortune to get privileges. Does he hold on? Others bet he wouldn't last long there. Some people were simply not prepared for the brutality of the prison. And for many, Diddy was a man who would not survive the test. The rumors fed the paranoia both within the prison and outside it, the reluctance to accept the new reality. Even surrounded by cold and suspicious glances, Diddy still tried to maintain his arrogance. He kept acting as if it were special, as if he still had power over the people around him. At first, he tried to talk to the guards, called them by name, implied that he could help them if they made favors to him. But the guards just laughed, shaking their heads, and moved on. For them, Diddy was just another prisoner, and any attempt at manipulation was useless. With the detainees, the approach was different. He tried to stay firm, exhale confidence, as if nothing affected him, but his movements betrayed him. He was looking over his shoulder more often than any other inmate. He hesitated before speaking. He withdrawn when a larger group of prisoners passed him. For those who were watching closely, it was not difficult to realize that he was afraid. The transformation of the mighty into one man over the days did his initial resistance began to turn into something different. The weight of isolation began to become unbearable. He who always lived surrounded by people, advisors, friends and fans now spent hours alone with no one to talk. The noise of prison contrasting with loneliness inside his own head. The signs of wear and tear began to appear. He spoke less. His gaze was always distant. He barely touched the food. Her nights were restless, always awake, always once, as if expecting something at any moment. The distrust within the prison only grew if before. The prisoners just avoided him. They were starting to wonder if he was really safe inside, or if there was something bigger happening behind the scenes. Rumors about the secret list only increased. If Diddy really had a file with secrets of powerful, he would not be safe anywhere, not even within the prison. But he was isolated, vulnerable, and surrounded by people who mostly didn't trust him. The question now was not if he would survive prison, but if he could survive himself. From the moment he entered the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC Sean Diddy Combs believed his stay there would be temporary. He was convinced that his fortune, his contacts, and his influence would still have weight even within the prison. At first, his posture reflected exactly this belief. He didn't seem concerned. He didn't seem scared. For him, that was just a mistake that would soon be corrected. But prison has a cruel way of testing even the most powerful men. The beginning of the illusion, Diddy still saw himself as a powerful man. In the early days, Diddy still behaved as if he was in an exclusive event. Surrounded by fans and flatterers, he walked the cafeteria with his erected chin, inflated chest, throwing eyes calculated to the other prisoners and guards, as if still a boss, as if still untouchable. He named influential people, made a point of mentioning famous lawyers and powerful contacts whenever possible, as if repeating the right names could open doors among the prisoners. He still tried to impose respect. This will be resolved soon. My lawyers are already taking care of it. I won't spend a long time here. Trust, he really believed it. The first time he tried to use his influence inside the prison was when interacting with the guards. He called them by name, tried to establish a friendly tone, implying that he could help them if they collaborated with him. But the eyes he received in return were coldly professional, no guard bending their attempts at charm or persuasion. Within prison, he was nobody. The first great defeat, the denied bail. The first big blow to your trust came fast. The first bail attempt was denied. When he received the news, he reacted as if it were an administrative error. He smiled, shook his head, and said something about correcting it soon. But as the minutes passed, his expression began to change. He closed his hands on his fists, his jaw crashed, and his gaze became more intense. The world was beginning not to obey its rules. Even so, he did not give in to concern immediately. In his head, that was just a temporary delay. He still believed he would leave at any time. He continued to show confidence and disdain, telling whom he wanted to hear that it changed nothing, that everything was already being resolved. But then came the second negative, and then the third. Each refusal was like a right blow to his ego. Gradually, the smug smile disappeared. The comments full of arrogance became less frequent, and the look of absolute certainty was replaced by something darker. Frustration. The change of posture. The man who commanded nothing more. Over time, Diddy could no longer ignore reality. He was not going out so soon. Her shoulders, previously erected in trust, were now bowed by the weight of an inescapable truth. His floor lost firmness. His formerly dominating presence now seemed smaller. The tone of his voice also changed. Automatic and confident responses gave way to silence. When someone asked about his situation, he just shook his head or said something short and vague. In prison corridors, rumors about their fragility began to grow. He no longer walked with that hoot chest. Now he's quiet. It's silent, and it's starting to understand where he is. The transformation was visible to everyone. Diddy was crumbling. The first sign of fear. The worst, however, was not the loss of arrogance. It was the emergence of fear. Now, when he walked the corridors or entered the cafeteria, he looked around more often. His previously dominant gaze now seemed suspicious. He began to speak less and observe more. If before I was trying to command the situation, now he just wanted to go unnoticed. And then came the worst moment. The night he was heard whispering to himself in his cell. The guards noted that, after the third negative of bail, Diddy began to behave strangely. He spent the nights in course, sitting on the edge of the bed, muttering to himself. One night, a guard that made the round heard clearly, "They lied to me. They lied to me." The repetition of the words in a low, disturbing tone caused the guards to observe it more carefully. He was no longer the same man who entered prison. The final humiliation, the apex of his fall, came when one of the prisoners caused him directly. Diddy, who at first tried to behave like untouchable, did not react. He didn't retaliate. He said nothing. He just stood staring at the floor. In prison, this is a clear sign of weakness, and everyone noticed. From that moment on, Diddy's fall was complete. If before, he walked through the MDC with an air of superiority, now he moved as a man who knew he was not in control. And everyone knew it. Silence can be deafening inside a cell. And for Sean Diddy Combs, this silence has become an invisible enemy, always present, always lurking. If before, he worried only about his freedom, now he would begin to fear for something much more valuable. His own life. Prison changes people. But it wasn't just the hostile environment that was turning Diddy. It was something deeper, darker. Over the days, distrust grew in his eyes. His posture became more rigid. And his most erratic behaviors. He no longer trusted anyone. The first signs of paranoia. It all started with discreet eyes on the shoulders. Diddy could no longer walk the corridors without turning his head, constantly checking who was behind him. In the cafeteria, he changed places several times, never sitting long in the same corner. Food became a problem. He inspected each tray he received, hesitated before giving the first bite, as if he expected to find something hidden between the food. Rumors that they could be trying to poison him began to haunt him. The guards realized that something was wrong when he began to refuse the recreation time. Before, he at least pretended confidence. Now, he barely left the cell. And then the whispers came. One night during the round, one of the guards heard Diddy talking alone, the low, hurried voice. "They are coming. They know. They know. This was not supposed to happen like this. I should be out of here. They lied. They sold me." The guard stopped for a moment in front of the cell, watching the prisoner muttering to himself, wide eyes sweating even at the cold temperature of the block. Fear takes over. Paranoia grew faster than he could control. Their movements were more agitated, their most tense expressions. He jumped to the smallest noise, flunted whenever someone called his name. But the worst came with the arrival of small warnings. First, it was a scribbled message on a refectory table. "You know too much." Then, during a trip to the bathroom, someone passed him and murmured discreetly, "Take care of your neck." It was just words, but the impact was devastating. He began to close even more, barely answered when they spoke to him. His eyes were always red with tiredness. He no longer slept. The guards noticed the changes and began to be aware. He was not just afraid, he was crumbled. The rumor of the secret list inside the MDC rumors circulate fast. And a particular rumor was growing between the prisoners and even between some guards. Diddy had a secret list. A list of powerful names involved in dirty crimes and secrets. If this list were real, he was a marked man. Some prisoners commented on the cafeteria. "If this list is real, it doesn't leave here alive." Maybe he already knew so much from the beginning. If he doesn't say anything, they may let him live, but I doubt it. This theory further fed your paranoia. If the list really existed, then it was being watched, waiting for the right time to be silenced. And if it didn't exist, then someone wanted everyone to believe it existed, which made him a target anyway. The guards start to notice MDC officers had seen paranoia cases before. But with Diddy, there was something different. He asked to be transferred from cell. More often, he refused visits, saying he didn't trust who was outside. He didn't talk about what he feared, just became increasingly closed. One of the veteran guards with over 20 years of experience commented with a colleague, "This guy is crumbling. If he continues like this, he himself will dig his own end." The moment that changed everything. The night of dread paranoia hit its peak on a specific night. Diddy was in his cell as always, but something that night seemed different. The guards realized that he was more restless, muttering to himself at a frantic rhythm. Then around 3 a.m. he started screaming, "They are here. I know what you want. You won't get me." The noise woke up half the block. He was glued to the wall of his cell, his eyes wide as if he was seeing something no one else saw. When the guards entered to calm him, he did not answer. He just repeated the same words, "They are coming. They are coming. I should have known it." He was taken to the medical observation sector, but his state only got worse. Fear was no longer a secret. Diddy was completely dominated by paranoia. But the question everyone asked was he just crazy? Or was there really someone trying to silence him? What really happened inside Sean's cell? Diddy Combs, which began as a common arrest case for a riot-fallen tycoon, quickly turned into a nightmare of paranoia, secrets and fear from a man who once controlled rooms full of powerful. He became a lost prisoner inside his own mind, always looking over his shoulder, always waiting for the worst. But now the big question is, was this paranoia the result of isolation and psychological press? Or did he really knew something that made him a target? Was the supposed secret list? Are there even greater forces wanting to silence it? Or was all this just the inevitable collapse of a man who lost everything? The incident of the sock, which then unfolded, raised even more suspicions. Was it a real despair or a message coming from within? If there is one thing that history teaches us, is that secrets have a dangerous way to come out. And the question now is, how long did you have before the truth, whatever, finally reach? If you believe this is just the beginning of something much bigger, leave your opinion in the comments. Did you know something you shouldn't? Will he leave this living? Be sure to leave the like if this story arrested you from start to finish, and signing up for more videos like this. What comes next can be even more shocking. Until next time, and remember, not everything is what it seems.